Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DeFurio. I'm your host for the show, and I appreciate you being here. Keys to the Shop is launching a couple of things. Okay, so February 11th at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time in the US, I am once again running the Principles of Cafe Success webinar. 1 hour of presentation, 30 minutes of live Q&A with people who sign up over at the website. You're going to find the link in the show notes. Go to the show notes and click on the link, and you will find a place to sign up for this webinar. We're going to be running things like this throughout the year, but this webinar itself might change a little bit. So if you want to get in on this now, I think it's a good time to do it. We have room for you, so go ahead and sign up in the links in the show notes to the Principles of Cafe Success webinar. And then key holder coaching groups. We have our mastermind cohort of coffee shop owners. The coffee shop owners with 2+ years experience of a brick and mortar that want to get together and help each other succeed in a mastermind session. 2 hours, 12 times over 6 months, we meet together. These are deep dives into member-specific issues, topics. We get to encourage, give insights, build camaraderie and community. If that's interesting to you, it's launching toward the end of March, beginning of April, the spring cohort of key holder coaching groups. So go ahead and sign up today. You have to make an application out. We're going to be interviewing people very shortly. So you can find links on the show notes there, or just email chris@keystotheshop.com. So I would love to talk to you about pacificfoodservice.com. That is the Pacific Barista Series. That's where you can learn more about them. Their extensive lineup of plant-based performance beverages that are designed for baristas, tested by amazing baristas, and used the world over for decades now, because they are the OGs of the plant-based beverage movement. And it stands up to the heat from steaming. It has great texture, keeps the flavor balance focused on coffee. It is an all-around winning product. And so if you go to pacificfoodservice.com, you can get samples, try it for yourself. So we talk about dialing in your coffee. We talk about dialing in espresso. I did a lot of dialing in with the client this last few days. And I was out in Ohio doing this session for a couple of days of assessment. And this particular cafe has been open for about 6 months or so. And, in the lifespan of a coffee shop, 6 months is very short. It feels like an eternity when you're just starting out. However, in the span of when you get to the 2-year mark, 3, 4, 5, you look back and you think, what were we even doing? At 6 months, we were just figuring things out. And that's kind of the point. The first year of business as a coffee shop is not supposed to be perfect. Our friends Martin and Tara Knight talked about this in our recent Founder Friday, about how you're supposed to go through evolutions. You don't just kind of explode onto the scene, if you will, and you're automatically everything that you should be or can be. You have to develop. And we talk about how you have to apprentice yourself to the process of becoming. And people will join you on that journey and love what you do at the beginning. And then they'll have more ways to love you as you change, as you grow, as they change and grow. So dialing in a coffee shop is actually a process that, in some ways, it just doesn't stop. It doesn't stop because life keeps moving on. We keep changing. I'm still who I am. But if you ask me, am I the same person I was 20 years ago? I'd say in a lot of ways I'm not. And it's because I have had various inputs. I have changed the way that I communicate with the world and the way I allow the world to communicate with me. And this exchange between reality, aspirations, things that are expedient, things that are difficult but necessary. I mean, this is just, we think about your own personal experience in the world when you take on having a significant other, or you take on having a child that you're raising, or a significant amount of responsibility that requires sacrifice and adjustment, whether that's moving or leading opening a coffee shop, there's a lot of stuff that changes us. And so dialing in has to do, first of all, with figuring out what is the thing, what's the goal here. With a coffee, we're talking about a flavor profile. We're trying to explore lots of different facets of the coffee, and it's different than when you're tuning in to a note. When I dial in, quote unquote, or I tune my guitars, there is a E note. That E note doesn't change. Like your E note is not different than my E note. That's what makes music tolerable. Okay. There is an absolute there. And I will tune according to what I know that absolute is. It's different though when it comes to coffee because it's a matter of taste. There is a certain kind of rigor that we have to have in exploring all of the facets to lay them before us and know what is possible and what is preferred, and then we make a decision. This blend of coffee has these components in it. We've tried it with this dose, this grind setting, this kind of water, this much water for this amount of time. We've prepared it this way, that way, and the other way, and we're kind of combining this thing until we just kind of make that Rubik's cube line up the way that it's like, this is what we want. We want the espresso to taste like this. And that is dialing in. And then we say, well, now what was the arrangement? What was our clever arrangement of factors and variables that led to that? And let's make that consistent. Even with coffee, that we want to have something consistent. But stuff changes, right? So if a component of your blend changes, you have to change some of the variables. So a coffee that doesn't lend itself as easily to a certain temperature of water, if it's a more dense coffee, might need to be opened up more with a finer grind, or it might need to be opened up more with a higher temperature of water to get from it what you need to get from it so that you can achieve something similar to what you had before, but still sometimes it might change permanently and you have to find the best of what you have available to you. And for me, I think that last part, the best of what you have available to you and the exploration of it, that's what I mean by dialing in. You have the staff you have now, you've got the building you have now, you've got your community and yourselves, and then all of the products that you've got set on the counters and all of the different ingredients that you've chosen to represent your menu, the type of milk, the different flavor syrups, whether you make it yourself or you bring it in. All of these decisions are now your tools. And to dial in is to think through how the place, the product, and the people are going to be experienced in your brand. Your brand is something, it's kind of like the accrual of experiences over time of those three things. When a customer comes in, they experience people, they experience themselves too. I like how I feel here in the coffee shop. I like how I'm made to feel here in the coffee shop. And the coffee professionals do the same thing. Staff say, I like working here. I like serving people. And when you've got two groups of people that are operating in that sort of positive environment, then what you end up having is a good culture. And it goes also for you as the owner. I like working with my staff. I like serving my community. And the opposites are also true, by the way. Of course, if you have a lot of stress and strain and you're entangled in sort of like bitter thoughts about these things, whether you're the boss or the employee or the customer, the culture is threatened. And that is something that needs to be dialed in. And those relationships is, I think, is probably the hardest thing that we have to do ever, because all of the other things we have really solid ideals for. If we have dialed in the coffee and we want to, always make the coffee taste this way, for us, that's a North Star that kind of doesn't change. That's what a North Star is in some ways. Like we have in our mind this image of what I want my coffee bar to be. And these people are getting in the way. And that management of people and leadership of people becomes the biggest crucible of your development. It's the test of your character. It's not, owning and operating a coffee shop is not a test of character in the sense that you have to do inventory or that you have to dial in a coffee. That's not really testing. What's testing is something that reaches a little bit deeper, and it has to do with people that misunderstand you or maybe even take advantage of you, and the temptations that we have to reciprocate, or even the temptations that we have to ignore the needs of people and not care for them as well because we're trying to make it easier on ourselves. And so this exchange, this relationship, dealing with, managing, leading, getting the opportunity to work with people is something that we always need to be dialing in. And just like a coffee, where you want to explore the different facets to know the length and the breadth and all of that stuff of the coffee, you need to know the same thing about people. And so the exploration of what your non-negotiables are in the people section of things is the first thing that you have to set up in your business. What do people do in your cafe? How are they doing it? And what does it look like for them to do it? This is what we call operational values. Values that are operational, not just aspirational. When you talk about mission, vision, values, we have mission. This is what drives us, or we have a vision for that to look like this in 50 years. We're going to transform whatever, and we're going to eliminate this or whatever your vision is. But the doing of the work every day, that's where operational values comes in. And they have to be based on real thoughts that you've had, not just assumptions. This is where I think people get in trouble because they make assumptions based on what they have on forums, or they ask ChatGPT, which don't do that, by the way. Do the work. You don't things don't stick the way they should when we use these kind of cheater methods, using AI to write manuals and other things like that. It's just not a great practice. And it's not a great practice because it doesn't stick, and because it's not yours, it's somebody else's. It's skimmed from another world. And a lot like when people step up in a science fiction movie, they step off a spaceship. Well, they have to test the air. They smell around and they oh, I can breathe. It has an atmosphere that's breathable for us. Well, your atmosphere has to be appropriate for the people that are working for you. And people can sense when the atmosphere is not quite right because it's not matched to this business, it's somebody else's. So here's the thing. Setting up operational values that you will not negotiate on, like kindness, respect, integrity, hard work, cleanliness, having a certain sense of urgency about work, and being a person of these types of character traits. These are things that then give you kind of a scope of saying, okay, well, here's our goal is for it's like saying, well, I want the coffee to taste good. Okay, well, that's great. What do you want the coffee to taste like? I think there's a certain sense in which you can choose something that's a little bit more robust, earthy, dark, chocolatey, that kind of thing. We want more of a classic flavor profile in our coffee. There's many different ways for that to be expressed throughout different origins and roast types and blends. However, that category is really important to identify as somewhat of a guiding principle. For people, these operational values are guiding principles that allow you to have that first layer of filtration on who gets to work in your coffee bar. Now, this is not the same as the thing that's meant by the common saying, filter coffee, not people, right? It's because we can't just hire anybody. So we do have to have some filtering mechanisms and selection mechanisms. This is one of them. And in order to do that, you need to think through, what does the work look like in the business based on what you've chosen to be your parameters, the feel of your brand. It's a chocolatey coffee that you serve, or this classic coffee in a unpretentious, accessible setting with people who act this way. Well, now you've got a great North Star, and all of the roads you take to get there might meander, but you're going in the general direction of that thing, right? So that's what's important with dialing in people, is knowing first of all, what you're going for. Second of all, when you're dialing in the people part of your business, you've got to take into account your own kind of limitations and habits that you've built up and be honest with yourself. I always tell clients when I'm working with them, I'm going to be honest with you and I'm going to give pushback. We're going to ask hard questions because if we don't, what ends up happening is we start to get into this exchange where we just say things to get through the conversation. We accept things for the sake of expediency. But back in the back of our mind, there's something nagging at us. And we don't have the muscle memory. We don't have the practice right now of speaking it out. We haven't allowed ourselves to do it, but we know we should. And so we procrastinate on it. We put it off. And eventually we build up some kind of a feeling of, I'm out of control and I'm kind of just faking it till I make it here with, I don't really have standards. I just want people behind the bar. And then that vision, that North Star, those things that you thought were going to be really important to you, they start to fade into the background and you sort of give up on it. And then you'll say, well, I'll take whatever I can get as long as I'm profitable, as long as I can make money. And then we start inviting all sorts and manners of service styles and menu items and practices that we would never have seen ourselves doing before, because all that matters now is money, because we didn't dial in that people part. We allowed sort of this downward spiral of accepting something that we never should have accepted to begin with. So you have to be thinking honestly and having honest conversations all the time and acting upon the realizations that you have. So if you discover that you can be kind of snappy, you are a little passive aggressive. First of all, who's telling you that? Ask the people closest to you to be honest with you about this, because you're going to be under pressure in the cafe with a group of people. I mean, usually if you're a little bit on the older side and you're working with younger people, you're going to have to do this work pretty faithfully in the beginning, more than you are researching the different types of POS systems that you need to have. Like, I think people waste so much time comparing and contrasting and watching YouTube videos on POS systems. They really want to make sure that they're not a POS. Anyway, I'll leave that there. Person that you're working with will interpret you differently because of their history and so forth, like back and forth. This is just the way it is. So we need to explore the different facets of relationships and how we are going to lead. Not only how we want people to behave and how we want people to, be and have their character in the work, but we also have to know that our character is going to be of a certain kind in the work. Not only are we going to exhibit and practice and apprentice ourselves to becoming better at those values that we hire for, but we're also going to cultivate a certain sense of leadership in ourselves and try to become as resilient as we can without the kind of community that we see them having, because baristas are kind of their own community and owners don't really have a community as much. We do key holder coaching groups for this purpose, but what we do instead sometimes for community is we just kind of like complain and we gossip, or we just stay lonely. If you are a resilient person, you've planned on it and you are trying to take on the ability to do harder things without as much praise in order to get the reward later. So it's kind of a deferred reward. So what we say, delayed gratification in a sense. So you might not get paid for the work you do for a year or so, whereas your baristas, they get paid right away. You are somebody who has to accept that some of those emotional systems of reward that you are used to will not come to you, and you can't project your feelings and emotions out onto the staff, because that's not good leadership and management. But this is, again, part of dialing in people, dialing in your staff and yourself according to a certain kind of relational standard. Like, I know myself well enough. I have self-awareness. I know them pretty well too. And we're going to get to know each other in the work, around the work, based on the work very well. So dialing in And it's not about getting to know them in other areas of their life so much as it is getting to know them around the work that you do first. That stuff will happen, and this is where people get in trouble too. They are too nice right away. They want to like win points because of things that are fun, things that are not work related, and then they wonder why the work suffers because we're not focusing on the work. And the culture is not built around it. So dialing in your people is not only about knowing who you're bringing in and who they are. It's not only about knowing who you are and what you're bringing to the table, and planning for things like delayed gratification, and planning to not project things onto other people, trying to be a good leader and build resiliency. Dialing in people is also, you have job descriptions and work that we do daily that defines our existence within these walls. It's who we are. So that's who you are, and that's who I am. Now this is who we are. And we is based on what we do, and how we do it is based on who we are. So you see how all of this stuff needs to be thought through, and it needs to be determined ahead of time, or at least planned on, or else it becomes a surprise. And when that surprise happens, we feel like we're doing something wrong, when all along it was just normal. A barista who's just taking a class on being a barista, who accidentally does something wrong with the espresso, feels like the world is ending. This is embarrassing. I ruined it. The machine is an expensive machine. I just probably broke the machine. And as a trainer, you're like, I, this happens all the time. Don't worry about it. Somebody doesn't lock the portafilter in all the way, and then all of a sudden explodes out because of the pressure. I'm not going to freak out about it because I've done that to myself before. They're going to freak out about it because they've never done it before. I'm trying to get them to see and maybe even experience a lot of things that you might consider to be world ending, but actually are just part of this world and part of the process of learning. And around people, you have to dial in to a certain kind of standard collectively and accept imperfections, accept the fact that now you're not accepting imperfections to the degree that somebody is like anti your values, like they're opposite and they're pushing against them. That's, you don't have to accept that. You need to kind of get rid of that as fast as you can, actually. But if you have not done the work we previously just talked about, anybody who has an issue in your cafe will look like somebody who is against your values when all they're doing is learning. And you might let them go, and or not give them a fair shake because you don't know what learning looks like, because we're not being honest with ourselves. We're not being having conversations about higher degrees of imperfection. We're just shooting for perfection, and anything less than that is a threat to my existence as a business. So I hope you can see the difference there. If you got the right people because of those values, and you're all working well together, but there's some mistakes being made, there's a culture of being candid, being honest with praise, honest with feedback and critique, and trust that develops over time from that relationship that will help everybody do better as they go, including you. So there's no insecurity now because we already know that we're going to be experiencing critique. We're going to be experiencing affirmation. These are things that is just a part of our culture, and we're going to become trusting of one another, such that if I don't get critique, it's going to be weird. Almost like you don't like me. Like, how could you not critique me? Like, I need to know so I can get better. That's the kind of stuff that we really want, right? So dialing in your people is really important. And I hope that some of what we just talked about is really helpful. Now, I want to move on to the place of the coffee bar. The place is a little bit easier to dial in than people. I think everything here is easier than people. And if you want more information about how to manage and lead, et cetera, it is a very major theme of this podcast. And you can just check the recommended links or go to the website, keystotheshop.com, and you will find a search bar, and you just search management, leadership, people, and you'll see. Just, take some time, go through that, and take notes and act upon what you get revelations about. Now, let's talk about the place. The place is something we dial in also. You can't start with the perfect coffee bar. Everybody who's opened a coffee bar thinks if only that wall was different, that color was different, we didn't have enough money for, area rug or that kind of wood, and whatever it is that you're thinking about right now, I get it. Everybody opens a second cafe, they're like, finally, like, we're going to build up enough money to get a better bar that's not just 2x4s. We're going to have cabinetry instead of steel tables, or you're going to have an extra fridge instead of just a bunch of dorm fridges under. I don't know what your situation is, but it's when you are building a space, and when we talk about design and everything else, you are operating under certain constraints. Even if you have a massive budget, you need to give yourself constraints. There's a couple of clients I've had over the years who said, I'm going to build on land and we can make it any size you want. And I was like, okay, well, we need to determine the limits here. Scope, limits, everything else, because not much can happen until you've got a canvas. You can't determine the proportionality of a tree in a landscape until you know how big the canvas is you're working with, right? So with a coffee shop, you might be taking over a garage, you might take over a warehouse. Whatever it is you're doing, you've got constraints, but you also have monetary constraints too. Time constraints. You have a certain number of months to build out, because then you start paying rent, and we don't have enough in the budget to continue to pay rent and not be open. The story is old as time, right? And so you have to accept some things that are not as ideal. Even the most palatial build outs that you see, somewhere along the way of that build out, somebody had to make the decision that said, that's my ideal, but this is what's reality. And we made that decision. But all along the way, you need to be asking yourself the question, how do human beings experience this space? Dialing in your space has to do with warmth, comfort, functionality, and accessibility. Dialing in means that you have an empathetic view, or a view from the customer's perspective of what they're going to experience throughout the different facets of your business that they will use. How they get to the bathroom, how they exit, how they enter, how they order, where they sit, how it feels to sit there. And you just need to go and read the book Unreasonable Hospitality, and even just go and see interviews with people who design dining rooms for fine dining. When they have high stakes, in other words, high ticket, high reputation, that when the stakes are really high, they want to put their butt in that chair and think, you know what, it doesn't feel quite right. Now, in a coffee shop, we don't tend to do that as much, because we don't really have the same kind of stakes. We're like, we're just a coffee shop, we're people come in, they get coffee, they want to go. And you might also even think, erroneously, by the way, that you don't want people to be there. You want them to get out so you can turn tables quicker. And it's real, but you don't want to make them feel uncomfortable, right? That's different. Now, when it comes to the high stakes, when you dial in, you've got to manufacture for yourself higher stakes than what reality will let you get away with. This is true with training, by the way. And I was just telling my wife about this, because we were talking about barista. I don't know why we were talking about barista training, but you got to train harder than your job actually is, so that when your job happens, it's easier. It's resistance training. So when it comes to dialing in your place, your space, give yourself some resistance training. Pretend like the highest honor in the world, the whatever judge or situation that would make you feel like, I really hope that they're enjoying their meal or their coffee. If you get nervous about them coming in, because it's potentially a lot of marketing for your business to have this good review, that's the kind of thing that you need to think about every customer that comes in your shop, who, frumpy as we all might be, annoying in the way we talk loud, sometimes they take a speakerphone call, whatever. We still need them to have a good time. And part of that is the sensory aspect of your business. So setting it up well means exercising sort of a plan that says, well, how do people experience this? And how can we maintain our seating, the smell, the textures, the functionality, the levels of the tables, the clear access to bathrooms and exits and order and pickup and seating, etc. Using lighting, using all the tools, the textures, the paints, and the materials. That's dialing in at first. But then when you start to work the space, it's maintaining it, but it's also fixing stuff when it breaks. It's also paying attention to how people interact with it and maybe changing it. And it might cost you a little bit of money to do that. But look, if you get a lot of people coming in ordering coffee and you got a 2-group espresso machine and you realize that maybe we need more capacity. Maybe you have a 1 group. You started really small in a tiny little outfit. Now you need a larger commercial machine. Whatever it is, you know that you want to increase capacity based on what business is changing, the number of people coming in. No different with the way that your actual cafe functions. The types of seating, your customers might complain about it, okay? Being very uncomfortable. Well, you need to take that just as seriously as you take the espresso machine needing to be of a higher capacity to receive more orders, to fulfill higher expectations now of your business. So whether we're talking about somebody's seating area or what's in the cup and how promptly those drinks can be made and to what degree, to me it feels like the same thing, because the space is oftentimes even more important than the coffee to your customer. I know that's kind of like anathema to say, like, how could you say that? We're coffee people, we're passionate about coffee. But look, the container that the coffee comes in is not just the cup, it's your shop. And if the container sucks, if I don't like holding the mug that I'm drinking coffee from, I'm going to transfer that feeling of meh or awful or whatever that feeling is to your coffee. It's going to infuse, it's going to get in there, and it's not fair. It's not fair to the farmer, it's not fair to you. I don't mean to make this sort of like a big, I don't want to make it too big of a thing, but it really does matter. So fixing things as promptly as you can and permanently, not just, patching it up with some cheap, option, because that's probably how you got into that pickle at first. Is you decided that the paper towel dispenser wasn't that important, so you just got something from whatever Target, and now it's breaking and you're like, well, I just got to get another one from Target. Don't do that. Get a better one. Get something, figure out why it did what it did. And then just like a shot that's pulling badly, you don't go like, well, I guess I'm just going to keep blindly trying whatever until the coffee looks better. That'd be the same thing. Fix the seating, fix the signage, make it. This is how you dial in the space. And for me, not a lot of places are doing this. I got to be honest. And I travel a good bit, and I get to coffee shops that have been open for years, and I'm like, I want your cafe that has been open for years to look like it's been open for years only because it's well loved, not broken, not dirty, not dysfunctional. Those are not signs of a well loved coffee shop. Okay, it's patina does not mean gross film. I'm not sure what it translates to exactly, but it's a quality thing that you can see from the bones of old taverns that are well loved, but they don't have to be janky. You see what I'm saying? So you got to dial in the space and always be keeping that in front of your mind, because it matters to the customer greatly. And if you want them to buy into your coffee, take a coffee class, buy a gift box during the holidays, and invest more, you've got to create a certain sense of comfort. And that comfort comes from knowing they take care of me, and I, as a reciprocal action, will take care of them. And I will probably even get into coffee a little bit more because they've made it easy for me to do it, rather than putting up these roadblocks and hindrances in the form of the space. Okay, so now the last thing is dialing in your coffee. But it's not just dialing in your coffee. And I'm going to repeat some things that I've said before, but it's okay. Dialing in your coffee, again, is about figuring out the facets of the beans, what you're going for in terms of menu development and flavor profiles represented on your menu, That's also, by the way, something that you have to determine based on customer demographic. Now, I'm not talking about national studies. Do not pay attention. I'm telling you, please do not get so deep in the weeds of national and global drink trends and try to force your little community to drink these things. Unless you know your people, unless you know what they do drink, and even then, you've got to only offer a few things within that category potentially and leave it there. But coffee shops have this way of operating where their menu is massive because they don't know who they are beverage wise. You've got to connect who you are to what you serve and what you serve to who you're serving. That's kind of like the three things that make up dialing in a menu, which then allows you to dial in a coffee. So if you just said to yourself, "Well, we want to get like really specialty coffee for our community," that's not useful because specialty coffee means 100 different things. What kind of specialty coffee? What flavor experience do you think people really want the most? Is this kind of place that's very shishi, like they everybody there shops at whatever, natural grocery store, Whole Foods. Maybe it's not a good analogy, but if there are people who actually personally have a coffee subscription and they travel the world and get bright coffees, then you have to know that about them. What coffees sell the most? You can find this stuff out. And many times I have done this legwork myself on the behalf of clients where I will go and see what the best sellers on these menus are by asking them. I'll call their competitors and say like, "Hey, what's the busiest time? I want to come in sometime." And I will come in, by the way, not just lying here. I'll say, what's the busiest time? And I'll ask, what's the best seller? What's the thing that sells the most in your cafe? Great. Now I have that information. There's no reason why any of us couldn't do that, right? Because I'm just talking to baristas on the phone. So the point is, we got to know who we're serving. We got to know who we are and what we want to go for and try to find the middle of this Venn diagram and make that what our menu represents. You can see this today where the coffee industry has sort of reintroduced the idea of more developed coffees. I see more and more dark roasts today. I see more blends today, and my heart is happy because I know the reason they're doing that is they have kind of had a little love loss between them and that insider specialty coffee geek community because people's menu about 10 years ago was not for customers, it was for their peers. Today, we're like, you know what we need to do? Sell more coffee. What do we want to sell? Maybe the stuff that's already selling a lot that we kind of begrudgingly did. And now we need to be a little bit more upfront and be like, we actually like that. We're going to do that. We're going to introduce more blends, introduce darker roasts, because we're a little bit better at roasting now too. We have more controls. Maybe before we just couldn't dark roast and we're not as good as we are now. That's a real thing. So think about your dialing in, less about dialing in a specific coffee, but a menu in a whole and what it represents for connecting with your community, not the coffee community. Honestly, who cares? Who cares what anybody in the coffee community is doing anywhere, except if you've already taken care to focus on your town, your baristas, your people. After that, maybe you can bring in and listen to Keys to the Shop or go to a conference, learn something from them to bring back to the people that you're already prioritizing. But we reverse that all the time. And we always go out and we're like, yeah, we're going to the industry so we can show these people back home, these peons, these customers that are so ignorant, just kind of educate them about what I love. And I mean, honestly, it's just like, why aren't we selling as much? It's blowing my mind. Anyway, dialing in also means tasting every menu item and knowing what it's supposed to taste like. When we're planning for working throughout the day, if you think about American football And I think anybody plays a team sport will have an opposing team and knowledge of the opposing team, so that when they go to play that team, they know what to expect. They might do this, they might do that. Now, the opposing team here is not your customers. It's your menu. Your menu is sitting there the whole time, even when you're slow, saying, here's a potential that somebody's going to order this drink. Do you know how to make it? Well, what about this combination? Do you know how to make it? What's it supposed to taste like? Skim milk, mochas with vanilla. What's your ideal? What's it supposed to taste like? Did you just say 2 pumps for everything because that sounded good? Or did you actually taste it? What do the customers think? Now that you've been open for a while, have you asked Mocha John about his mocha lately? Taste the menu and keep track of how everybody makes everything, because we've got a standard for milk. We've got a standard for espresso and drip coffee. And we have steps that we take to make a flat bed and to steam milk to a certain temperature. These things absolutely matter. And they can't matter under pressure unless we keep them familiar. If we don't do this on a regular basis, quarterly menu making exercises for all staff, tracking progress, training specifics, tasting the menu, then what's going to happen is we're going to put coffee out. We're going to be happy with having put coffee in cups and customers taking it. And then we're almost like holding our breath, going like, oh, they didn't complain. Okay, good. Because I kind of biffed that one, I didn't really fill the cup up all the way. I know that today we probably had like 18 different volumes and ratios of milk to espresso, but customers love it. No one's complaining. And then all of a sudden we get this downward, it's not an upward spike, it's a downward fall. And we're like, I don't understand what's happening. It's because we don't understand what we're doing, because we're not trying to understand what we're doing. And it's like a blur. And I'm guilty just as much as anybody throughout my career of having whole days and weeks where it was just like we made a lot of drinks. I don't even know how good those drinks were, but people seemed to like it, and that satisfied me. But actually, it just set me up for future compromise. So systems to dial in the coffee and the menu items need to be in place, and that's the whole shebang. That's the business. If we dial in people, if we dial in our place, and we dial in the product, and we unite ourselves around that work, you get a really great coffee shop. Now, that's what I have to share with you today. I hope it was helpful. If you have questions about this, feel free to email chris@keystotheshop.com. Any other questions are fine. If you have inquiries about coaching and consulting one-on-one with myself, Keys to the Shop, more than happy to talk to you. Don't forget about the webinar coming up February 11th, and also the keyholder coaching groups, mastermind cohorts for coffee shop owners that I run now the 3rd year. We got a spring cohort coming up. So thanks, everybody. I appreciate you. And as always, I hope that this episode has truly given you keys to the shop.